Welcome back to Jersey Matters. I'm Larry Menti. We continue our conversation with Monmouth County Sheriff Sean Golden, who is, I think it's fair to say, fired up about the new marijuana legislation that it's now making its way through Trenton. You've dealt with a lot of topics. Let's deal with training officers in the state on how to deal with marijuana.
Sure. Well, one of the things we discussed down at the Senate committee hearings were, the drug recognition experts and DRE. And that's not easy for local municipalities and on the officer. I mean, you're talking about 2 weeks of training to become a drug recognition expert, to have field sobriety testing. These are the horizontal gaze, nystagmus, all the other physical and psycho things that you detect out there. Then that has to be followed up with confirmation on bloods, if you will, that you in fact made those hits, those detections, based on what was then later found in evidence in blood, and submit that to court. You have to do over 12 of those. At the end of the day, it's a year process for an officer to even go through all that training and then maintain proficiency in that training. The other thing we do, so that's going to be very difficult for local law enforcement, particularly the very small departments that can't afford to send somebody away for training for 2 weeks and then try to maintain and try to engage in these types of motor vehicle stops. And then the other thing that we're facing in law enforcement is our canines. Our canines are trained in 30, 40 substances, depending on what their training is. One of them is marijuana. Now you take the marijuana and the probable cause for marijuana, if it's legal. Well, you've decertified a class of canines out there that have been trained by taxpayer money, that have been out there, right? And all of a sudden, that case is challenged in court. Were you hitting on the legal marijuana my client was carrying or the heroin my client was carrying? What's your probable cause? I mean, I jokingly say we can't train the dog, put 1 for marijuana, 2 paws up for heroin. It doesn't work that way. So you will essentially declassify, and we will have to recertify a whole new class of canines out there. Think about the cost of what it is for a canine dog, and then to send a person, a canine handler, 12, 16 weeks for canine training, and what that will cost the taxpayers. That's something else that's not addressed in the bill.
In the interest of time, I'm going to just say that in other states, crash rates under the influence have gone up, and also insurance rates are expected to go up. We've done stories on that, so let me just move on real quickly from that, because I know that's important to you, but it's being moved through very quickly right now. As we're speaking, there are people being strong-armed to vote yes on this bill.
No question.
So one of your biggest complaints is, why the rush? Can't we just slow down?
Well, sure. I mean, you look in committee, and as you said, the rush in committee. Very few of those for or against, by the way, were able to testify on Monday during those committee hearings. We'll see what happens Thursday. But there was more backroom discussion than there was actually public discussion on this debate and discourse. And it should be a debate and discourse. Listen, I always say, I'm an executive, law enforcement executive, right? And they're going to hand down a policy out of Trenton that ultimately law enforcement has to execute throughout this county and the 21 counties in New Jersey. Right now, this policy is a disaster for law enforcement as written because of those trainings, because of the canine, because of the crash data, empirical crash data that we have of 5 years. And by the way, not as densely populated Washington and the state of Colorado, not as densely populated motor vehicle-wise. As you know, we're one of the most populated and congested motor vehicle in the country, the state of New Jersey, right? We have more registered vehicles than some states combined, right? But we're going to introduce this empirical data of crash data. And listen, it's not made up by law enforcement. These are National Institute of Insurance, the National Highway Traffic Safety. It's their crash data over a 5-year period.
We're not going to have a lot of time to talk about the opioid crisis, so please, we'll come back another time and we'll talk about that. One thing that struck my interest when I was reading some articles about Monmouth County is, are you considering legalizing injection sites?
Listen, there's talk about this everywhere throughout the state. I don't know that's, it's very complicated, Larry. In a state where we have the heroin, some of the highest in the country, heroin overdose deaths, and certainly in Monmouth and Ocean County, it's difficult to have a conversation about injecting marijuana into this and then legalized sites because we're fighting a battle here every day in this office, in the prosecutor's office, and many like it across the state of New Jersey. We're fighting this heroin epidemic. I mean, if you told me that we would be delivering Narcan, that I would have to worry about Narcan for my canines, Narcan resistant and fentanyl now resistant gloves that we have to purchase, medicine drop-off boxes, reaching out to the community with our Hope One truck at least twice a week, going to train stations and shopping malls, trying to catch some of those that are addicted, and their families to help out. I mean, all of these things, incarceration in our facility, which with bail reform led to now I have full-time people over at the jail just screening those that are afflicted with addiction,
and
so we can get them help.
And the numbers seem to not move, and that's what's so frustrating about all this.
It's very frustrating.
Let me get back to the injection sites, though. You don't seem like you've made up your mind on whether that's a good or bad idea.
I don't know. Listen, to me, I'm a data type person, as you can tell. I'll have to look at some of the data across the country, see how that works. If in fact it lowers the rate, then okay. But again, I'll have to. The jury's still out for me.
One last question. We've talked about the race for governor. We've talked to some of the expected Republican candidates, and your name keeps coming up. Are you running for governor?
Yeah.
Are you going to run? Are you thinking about it?
I love being sheriff, as you can tell. I'm very passionate about it. I grew up in this county. The sheriff's been a great job. It's one of the, I'm so honored. 8 to 10 years and 28 years in law and public safety as a medic, a firefighter, a law enforcement officer, and sheriff. So my heart is here in the sheriff's office, and as you know, champion across the state when it comes to things like bad policy. If that leads to something else later on down the road, we'll tackle that. But for right now, we have a lot of work to do in the county, as you know, as you pointed out, with, again, this flawed marijuana policy for law enforcement and our local towns and communities. And that's my focus right now.
Great. Thank you.
Larry, thanks for having me.
Appreciate the time. Thank you so much. Monmouth County Sheriff Sean Golden. Jersey Matters continues right after this. Still to come on Jersey Matters, what do you do about a dog that won't stop barking? How about a heavy fine? We'll tell you where they're planning to do just that when Jersey Matters continues.